Hello everybody, and welcome to 2025 Bingo. As the name might suggest, I do a yearly card on this channel, where I sort of try and predict the year's events, and then I come back to it at the end of the year and I see how it's shaped up against the year's actual events. You've heard this before, people say things like, oh, this wasn't on my bingo card for this year, or whatever, and essentially this is just sort of a real life thing of that we're actually tracking what the predictions were. So I've done this since 2022, so I did prediction for the year of 2022 at the start of the year, no video for that. And then I reviewed it at the end of 2022, which there is a video for, and then I made my card for 2023, and so on and so forth, and I did it last year, and set out my card, which I will be going through now, and then at the, sort of the back end of the video, I'll be going through my 2026 one. They're mostly unscripted and unedited, these videos, so I kind of just waffle on for much longer than an average video on this channel would look like, but I've got some talking points in front of me, and I'll be going through each and every square. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, first square on last year's bingo card was Diddy Goes Free. The general sentiment of this one was essentially that he would be pleading down to lower charges or lower classes of crime, and he wouldn't actually see any jail time. I think that was a big part of the requirements for this one. But for this one, partially right. He did get a good lawyer, I think I said something like that in the last video, and he got sentenced for a lower class of crime. He didn't get the premeditated terrorism or something, or the trafficking of humans. He got convicted under the Mann Act, I think. And so he probably got the best situation he could, given the charges. They did ask for house arrest, which is something I mentioned last time as well, like 10 times, never got it. And so, thank God, Diddy did not go free. So the first card, we did not get that one. Did not get it. So, moving along quite swiftly to the next one, we have big discussion about parasocial behavior. The thinking for this one was essentially on the lines of that there would be some kind of event throughout the year that caused a general discussion, a general sort of more focused, present in the mind discussion online about parasocial behavior and how far it's gotten. Someone's house is broken into, or something kind of creepy happens with a fan who's pretty obsessed with a streamer or a YouTuber. And obviously this stuff happens quite a lot, but I thought it would be a big event that kind of caused some sort of incident. It didn't happen. There was an incident with Emmy Rue, the Twitch streamer, being assaulted at TwitchCon, but it could have started a conversation like that because obviously it was a guy who just came up and he was trying to hug her or something, tried to lean in and kiss her. But it ended up being more of a conversation about how bad Twitch's security was, that they banned her bodyguard or something like that, and then the actual security they provided in this instance was totally inadequate. He just ran past the line and got to her immediately. So no, we're 0 for 2. 2 squares in. This is not the usual way it goes. I think in the last 3 years we've got a top line bingo every single year immediately, and I shuffled it up last year specifically to try and get a situation like this where we're maybe not hitting home runs right at the very beginning of the video. So 0 for 2. Let's see this next one. I'm not hopeful reading what it is. Drake starts acting again. I think we can move past this one pretty quickly. I think unless you are counting all the weird gambling ads he did, where he's throwing his slippers at drones and stuff and it's clearly all set up, I don't think this happened, and I don't think you can count it as happening. So yeah, we'll move on from that one. The next one, the final one on the top row, which is looking pretty dismal so far, was Minecraft film actually kind of okay. And I think the premise was, I'd seen the trailer, it looked terrible, it looked like a cheap, sort of money-grabbing, built-in audience film that was going nowhere, and I had hope that maybe, with people like Jack Black on board, Jason Momoa, they might make something of it, something that was, tolerable. I saw it, I laughed, but I have to say it was one of the worst films I have ever seen. It was genuinely a terrible film, and all of the chicken jockey and the sort of the music from Jack Black, all the sort of, memes that stemmed from it were not enough to improve the film. They were not enough. There was not enough laughing meta moments in there for me to justify watching it because it was a genuinely terribly made film. I have no idea how things like that are getting, more common, if anything. It was really, really bad. And so I can't, in good faith, even though I laughed, even though I kind of liked watching it because it was so bad, I cannot in good faith give myself that it was actually kind of okay. So, top row, pretty bad. Didn't really get anything on the top row. Well, we didn't get anything on the top row. So, not good predictions from me this year in terms of top row stuff. We'll try and see if we can rectify that in the 2026 card, but for now, we're going to move on to the second one, which starts off with one of my best predictions, I think. GTA 6 doesn't get released. And so obviously I made this at the tail end of 2024, and that was, the time the trailers had released, and they said they were going to release it in December 2025 or something, like that. And I said, from everything I'm hearing out of the studio in terms of delays, layoffs, things like this, just there's no way this gets released. And well, lo and behold, I think a few months into 2025, they announce it's not getting released in 2025. We're going to take it till next year. And I think I'm going to carry this theme over into 2026. I think I'm on a hot streak with this one. I don't think it's going to get released at the time they say it's going to next year either. So you'll see something about that later. But for now, 1 on the board. We are 1 on the second row. So we're 5 for 1, I think. Not too good. But the next one is a tried and true classic, which I think we get pretty much every year. YouTuber ousted as predator. So, if it's your first time seeing this, you might think that's maybe a bit morbid, and it is, but we put I put this in there every year because generally it tends to happen. And I'm not keeping count or anything, but I'm saying that it's kind of, like I said, a morbid eventuality. I think that's the words I used in another video. And usually we're sport for choice, but to be honest, the world might be healing in this respect, because there actually wasn't many to choose from. And there's some smaller Minecraft YouTubers. I think there was another YouTuber, I think a Spanish-speaking YouTuber that might be worth mentioning. But the one I've gone with on this one, and this might be controversial, you might even argue that I haven't got this square altogether, I've chosen Young Philly. Big YouTuber, British YouTuber. And although the accusations did come out in 2024, late 2024, I didn't include them on my card because they were quite new, and I think a lot of people were suggesting that this was a false accusation. I think my preference is to believe these sort of as much as it matters, because obviously I'm just some random person. I tend to believe that there is something fishy if someone's accusing a guy like him of this kind of conduct, which is, as I understand it, in Australia, he was accused of quite violently raping somebody. And I tend to believe things like that because it's a pretty big accusation to make, and the women generally don't get anything from making it. It's not good attention, even if they get that. It tends to come with a lot of death threats. The guy's very famous. So in this instance, right off the bat, I knew something wasn't correct, but I think a lot of people were hadn't quite distanced themselves from it yet. And then going into this year, he pleaded not guilty, and almost immediately it was followed up by more charges from the Australian side of things. And interestingly, and quite critically, I think this is the kind of thing that made everyone distance themselves, is that another lady in Magaluf, which he had also done like a show at, accused him of doing the same thing in a hotel room. So everyone kind of drew their conclusions. Everyone very much distanced themselves from him. And going into this year, he was a pariah, And maybe it would have been an unfair thing to say that this can be part of the prediction, but I'm going to keep it, I think, because this was kind of the big year for that. The new charges, I haven't heard anything about him positively in well over a year now. And I think last year maybe it might have been premature that in, October, November to declare him that. There were other sort of bigger fish to fry at the time, I guess. Moving on from that pretty evil one, we have one that was going to be confusing to people if you didn't see the last video. It's confusing to everybody if you did see the last video, to be honest. It was a friend submitted one. I asked somebody to try and fill this square in for me, and they said, my friend James said, people fuck with Aladdin again. Now, the criteria for that was quite unclear. It's hard to see where we would have sort of fulfilled this one, even if it did actually happen. But that is completely, it's irrelevant because, quite frankly, it didn't happen. I did not see anybody talking about Aladdin, So we're going to go ahead and not say that we got that one, or say that we didn't get that one, to be more clear. Okay, so as we come into the end of the next row, the second row, we are 2 rows down, and so far, 2 squares. So there's going to be no bingo in the top 2 squares, or top 2 rows, and there's going to be probably no diagonal bingo. There's nothing coming from these because of where they are. The spacing is quite bad for this one. We're going to have to get a row bingo later on, I think. And it might be the first year we have convincingly lost one of these, or lost one of these at all. So to finish out the second row, we have Frank Ocean returns. Pretty much we can all acknowledge that didn't happen, and I didn't hear anything about it happening either. So not much debate to go onto that one, and I think end of row 2, pretty dismal showing. It's not looking good so far. Let's just move on to the third. To start off row 3, this one was probably ill-advised looking back at it. Maybe wishful thinking, 'cause I'm not a biggest fan, but I put no Sydney Sweeney movies. I thought I did like some preliminary research, nothing sort of, that's going to show me actually whether this is going to come true or not. But I didn't see if there were any major projects that I'd missed that would then make it impossible for me to win this one. Like if they had announced they were going to release Euphoria on June 25th, 25. I didn't see anything like that. And so I took a chance that she wasn't going to announce any new projects, and she wasn't going to work on any new projects. And I knew she had some stuff in the works, but nothing that I thought was going to release this year. And I got all the way to October, I think it was, the end of September, before she released 3 films back to back to back to completely ruin this square. I think she released the Jackie film, the boxer one. Echo Valley came out on something. And then The Housemaid was the one that really killed it. That's the one I first heard about, and then I had to go back and look. But yeah, this one did not come true. To be honest, it could have come true. You know, the gods were trying to help me out with this one because they cast like a moron spell on her or something while she was in an interview. They had the whole American Eagle Jeans thing, and they asked her, you know, we're going to give you a chance here. Are you a white supremacist? And she didn't deny it. You know, she didn't say she was, but she could have just slam dunked, no, I'm not a white supremacist. But she said something like, you'll know when I have an opinion on things. What does that mean? You know, are you a white supremacist? And, you know, that might have stopped her from getting projects, but clearly not. People are rocking with that. Anyway, onto a more joyous one. This one is actually more, I don't know, it's been grim in recent years just because of its unlikely nature, but I'm actually happy to say this one, this mainstay, Over by Christmas, referring to sort of general conflicts on the planet, the ones that stick out, did come true. So, it's arguable, but given the ongoing nature of the Palestine-Israel conflict, and with Palestine being internationally recognized, the war coming to a permanent ceasefire with a 20-step plan to resolve the situation, I think it's fair to say this one is over by Christmas. It was over by the end of the year. And I think that is a great thing. You know, I think it's a great thing to acknowledge when stuff like that happens. Obviously, there's a lot more to be done on the world stage. There's a lot more suffering on the planet other than just this conflict. And to be honest, this conflict isn't yet over. We'll have to see how the plan works itself out. But preliminarily, this one was over by Christmas. You know, there was a full-scale leveling of Gaza, you know, constant fighting, lots of suffering. And as I understand it, that has dialed back somewhat. There is no more constant firefights breaking out and bombs landing, or at least not as much as there was before. And so I'm happy to say that is on the right track, and so I'm going to give myself that one. So we're starting off row 3, 1 not achieved, or 1 not ticked and 1 ticked. And so let's see going into the third one on the third row. Celebrity brand implodes. All I can say is this didn't happen. Oh well. If anybody knows a good example of this happening, because I can't keep my finger on the pulse of everything, let me know in the comments. But as far as I understand it, this did not happen to anybody. I think the criteria specifically here, a celebrity brand like, you know, one of Ryan Reynolds' alcohol brands, one of the many vodka brands run by celebrities, it dies a fiery death. One in the news, you know, sort of like they get sued into oblivion for being like, I don't know, for killing people. Not quite that serious, but like something that, it was a total collapse. That was the kind of thing I'm saying. And that didn't happen. So moving on to the fourth one from row 4, we're looking quite bad now. And although we have quite a few, a bingo is looking unlikely. But with the fourth square, I am happy to say this one pretty much came true. I'm going to give it to myself. Elon Musk fired from cabinet. Start of this year, end of last year, it was announced that Elon Musk is going to be heading up this Department of Government Efficiency, working on stuff as a sort of non-government contractor. And so there is a time limit on which these contractors can work there, as far as I know. And that obviously elapsed, and he was removed by that process. And as far as I understand, he was leaving on good terms. However, mere days after he left, he accused Trump of being a pedo, essentially, said he was in the Epstein files. Trump, was trying to say he was going to remove his government contracts. Musk then immediately announced that he was going to stop making the only space-ready crew rocket in America. I can't remember what it's called. He said he was going to decommission that plan, and then said he wasn't going to be. And he called for Trump to be impeached. And it was a disagreement over the big, beautiful bill at the time. But the nature in which that happened, if he'd done that, you know, clearly there was something bubbling over. And I think, given this administration's sort of disregard for the rules, I imagine he would have been back in government offices in no time whatsoever, or advising something like that in no time whatsoever, if they needed him to be. But given how it ended, I'm going to go ahead and say he wasn't fired, but I did say in the video he was by some means removed. And I think, although the time elapsed, and that was a predetermined thing, this counts. I think the level to which they were beefing at the end, and to which they, perhaps are still on bad terms with one another, he would have been removed, and so I can give it to myself in good faith, I think. So that's the end of row 3, and I think we got 2 from that one, so we're looking down the barrel of a no bingo here. We'd have to go crazy in the last row to get one. So, ladies and gentlemen, hold your breath here. This is going to be a tense showdown. But we're starting off with some winners here. Meta release insane consumer AR products. So I cooked with this one. I was very, very particular about this, and I had to be Meta specifically. And I said, the Apple Vision Pros came out. Google are working on stuff as I understand it, and they're gonna, Meta had the most skin in the game with the whole metaverse stuff to need some augmented reality product to come out and really capture the market. And so I had no prior knowledge of this. It's entirely subjective on whether you think this is insane enough, but obviously the Meta AI glasses have received massive attention from launch. So now being advertised like every 10 scrolls on Instagram, the cameras in them, the sort of, the thing I found most insane was the neural control band. So obviously it didn't work in the demo, but that imperceptible movement thing, being able to sort of control what's going on in the glasses before it's even visually perceptible, is really quite cool. I think it's pretty impressive stuff. And inside those glasses, you can do full video calls and watch reels and shit. Like, it is quite an advanced piece of tech, considering it's that sort of form-fitting, this tiny little pair of glasses. And it isn't a proof of concept, so part of this was a consumer AR product. It had to be a consumer, it had to go straight to market, and that's what it's done. It's not been a proof of concept that they've sort of played around with it for multiple years, and it hasn't been something that's prohibitively expensive or unwieldy like the Vision Pros. They aren't very good because you look like an idiot wearing them. And they also cost many thousands of dollars. These are straight to market, few $100 glasses that have pretty big capability for it. And so I'm gonna give myself this one. I think this was a good prediction, and I think the level to which I predicted it was quite impressive. Very much like the GTA 6 one, even though that one might have seemed a bit more obvious. Next square, we've got another winner. I hate to spoil it, but Trump shuts down the government. Now, for this one, I mentioned that it might have happened earlier in the year. There was some debate over a spending plan at the time not being passed, and that might have caused a government shutdown. And so that was in January. But I was pretty certain, given that the longest government shutdown in the US history was done by Trump in 2018, I was pretty sure he was going to do this again, even if it's not his fault. And this one, I assess it to be pretty much an equal party thing, no matter how many bits of propaganda go back and forth. It seemed like Trump wasn't meeting with the right people at the right time. He was refusing to do it until they passed it, and they wouldn't pass it on a number of issues. And so, Democrats, Republicans, whatever, you want to blame, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, it caused a 43-day long government shutdown and lost $11 billion. It caused a hemorrhaging of $11 billion. And so that is now the longest government shutdown of all time, closely followed by his other one in 2018. And so this one, pretty proud of myself. I think maybe some people think it's obvious. I'm not that well versed on sort of American politics. But it's to me, this seemed like one that it was predictable, and it was. So we'll see what goes on going forward. This one's not being carried over. I'm not going to try and predict this again. But that one, good prediction, I think. Good prediction. So, for the last it's a non-prediction square, because every year on the bingo card we have a free space at the end. Like a lot of bingo cards, they have the free space, and that can facilitate a number of bingos sort of diagonally left and right, or sorry, up and left. And it can, so this one, basically, this last prediction square is going to come down to whether we win or not. And I have to say, unfortunately, we did not win. First wild orca death was the prediction for this square. Perhaps unwise to put it here. Like I said, I jumbled the card up to make it try a little bit harder so the surefire ones weren't going to be on the same row. But unfortunately, orcas did not kill anybody for the first time in recorded human history this year. But I probably should have seen this coming, which leaves only the free square left. And as you can see, I'll arrange them on screen, there is no bingo. There's no diagonal left, up, down, right. No bingos to be had here. Don't know how many we got, because I can't do the math off the top of my head. But unfortunate, it's not as good a performance as other years, but I stand by it. I think the predictions we got in there, they were worth their weight in gold. They were pretty hard ones. I made it really hard for myself this year, I think. So, pat on the back for me, pat on the back for anybody who filled out their own. And we'll now move on to the 2026 card. I've not been uploading a lot this year. This one's going to be quite a quickly made one because I've been quite busy with my own projects. And so this is going to be really unscripted, really unedited. You're going to probably notice some mistakes in here, but we're going to move right ahead to the 2026 card, try and curtail this a little bit early. the 2026 bingo card. Reveal for the first time, I can exclusively reveal the first square on your new bingo card, or my new bingo card, is going to be a tried classic. And I hate using that word because it's not really how you should describe these things, but it's YouTube ousted as Predator. Like I said, I'm trying to jumble these things up, so out the gates, we're going to do this one. This one might help us get a few bingos next year as well, considering its positioning. We can go for a diagonal here. But YouTuber ousted as Predator. Hopefully, this doesn't happen. My better judgment says that it will. So, it's being included in the card. Surprise me, guys. You know, I don't think many of you will be watching this, if any. Don't be predators, you know? Like, it's really not that hard. Anyway, the next item on the bingo card for 2026 is Scuffle over Greenland. Now, at the time of recording this, tensions surrounding this have ramped up significantly since I wrote it. I think Trump has said something like, we'll get it the hard way or the easy way, whether they like it or not. So, what I mean by this, Scuffle over Greenland, is that there's going to be some, you know, the military equivalent of a kerfuffle. There's going to be a skirmish of some kind. Not necessarily guns being fired, but some kind of military standoff that genuinely comes to blows over Greenland. I believe there might be some military show of force by the United States, and Denmark are either going to have to decide to call in the big guns from NATO, they're going to have to call in the member states to help defend it, or maybe just do it themselves. Or they're going to have to just capitulate and they're going to have to hand over Greenland. And so that's what I think is going to happen. Some sort of military show of might which causes Greenland to be given to the United States in some way or another, whether that's the resources, the land needed for military bases, whether it's the United States, whether it's being bought, or whether it's going to be handed over just in a military sense. I think there's going to be some real scuffle over Greenland, and this one is contingent on that military engagement. If it's bought, doesn't count, but there has to be some kind of military engagement where they come to blows. Anyway, a pretty topical one following that, and I think honestly these two are following each other for a reason, because they could quite well lead to one another depending on the midterm outcomes. Trump impeached again. I think, given the level of global aggressiveness this guy's putting out, you know, regardless of his policies, like him or hate him, I think this could very well lead to his impeachment. You know, the idea of turning on a NATO member state and forcing them to give you land under sort of, you know, threat of invasion, essentially, that's not best practice, let's call it that, and it could really start a geopolitical crisis. So I think if that were to go ahead and he were to play his cards wrong in that instance, he might get neither Greenland or another year in office, you know? And there's a very real chance that could happen. So, criteria for this one's pretty simple. He doesn't have to actually be impeached and removed. Essentially, they just have to call for his impeachment. There has to be another process fully like there was the other times this has happened to him. And I think I would bet that maybe he is removed this time if it was for the reasons I've been stating. But basically, the impeachment process has to be started against him again. So, end of line 4, or row 4, we're bringing back another classic, Over by Christmas. You know, this one is very much my sort of limited way of putting out some good into the world, or at least part of it, and hoping for an end to some, you know, some major, minor conflict that sees sort of an end to some human suffering somewhere. Ideally, this square would be filled by a ceasefire, an ending, some sort of cessation in the war in Ukraine. This year, that's the sort of one that I'd be kind of targeting my mind. You know, if we're talking about last year was the Israel-Palestine thing, that was on the, you know, tip of everyone's tongues for a whole year, basically. This could be a big year for the continent. And so, hopefully, but this time next year, or earlier, preferably, because obviously it's well into January now, but hopefully by this time next year, we'll be taking this one off. And that leads us to row 2. So to start off this one, we've got a familiar square. Don't think it was in the same place last year, it might have been. GTA 6 delayed at least once. So, criteria once again, very simple for these. Essentially, GTA 6 has to be delayed. Has to be delayed in any fashion, whether that ends up being the same year, you know, whether it's playable by the very next week or whatever. It doesn't matter. If it's delayed at least once, which has obviously happened several times now, and so that would be a fairly big risk for the company. Obviously, people are still going to buy it regardless, but in terms of really losing interest in this game, the worst thing they could do is continuously delay it like this. You know, it could lead to sort of a cyberpunk moment where it's delayed for a number of years, and then people get to it and they go, well, this just isn't as good as I thought it was going to be. So, this square, GTA 6 delayed at least once. This next square is a bit more sort of current events-y, it's a bit more socio-political, let's say. I am not a big fan of AI. I have used it extensively over the last few years in terms of like a chatbot form to ask questions, to learn things. I think it's really good for that kind of thing. Generally, I think AI is way better at doing negative, evil things. It's way better at like defrauding people than it is actually helping them. And so on balance, I see all this money going into AI and, you know, people say it's a bubble, and I wholly agree. And I see the investment that people are making in what seems like an ill-advised move. And I can only say that the AI bubble is going to burst. And so that's this square. AI bubble causes economy to crash. And so this is another belief of mine. I think that we are sort of on the precipice of a sort of a big reset here in terms of the global markets. And especially with this, I think the amount of kind of debt-fueled ventures that are going into AI as well does not bode well. It's sort of reminiscent of the 2008 financial crash in a lot of ways. And so I think it's going to happen again. I think, you know, I hope it doesn't, because of how much suffering something like that causes on a global scale, even if it's just in America. And it probably will start in America. But essentially the prediction here is that AI bubble is going to collapse. That causes some sort of tightening in the general market, and that it's going to uncover some pretty big holes in the economic stability of major Western countries. That's my belief. And so there's going to maybe you might see some household names go out of business. I think it's more likely to affect sort of the kind of medium-sized businesses en masse and small-sized businesses en masse. And I think that the big players will take a lot of hit as well, but they're going to be able to ride this out. Generally, I think this is going to affect things like private banking institutions, places, or rather private credit institutions, sort of asset managers. They're the ones that are really on the hook for things like this. And if enough of those goes bust, the major banking system is going to take a hit too. And so without getting into the weeds of this prediction, you'll know this when it happens. There is no criteria to effectuate this. I can't imagine what this would look like if it did happen. But essentially, any kind of collapse of worldwide AI popularity that causes some sort of financial unsteadiness and potentially, well, I would say, contingently on this one, that there's a crash following it, that some sort of market contraction is in place. Hopefully not, though. But that's my prediction. The third one in row 4 is Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, MH370, is found. There is a renewed effort to go and find this plane at some point. The Malaysian government they're in contract with a deep sea salvage company to the tune of $70 million, which is only given if they actually find this plane. And they're using underwater robots and everything. And I think this is the year that those ramped up efforts, those more sort of technologically advanced efforts than they were in sort of the 2010s, means that this plane will be found. I've watched documentaries with my girlfriend about this, and it's just terrible, obviously, what happened, and there's so much uncertainty around where this plane could have gone, why it even deviated from the path, and sort of whether the people in power, the Malaysian government, the FBI, whether they're telling the truth about what could have gone on this plane. If that is the case, the flight will be found. And so I think that's my prediction, and I think that will bring great peace to a lot of families. And so I do very much hope that the wreckage of Airlines Flight 370 is found. For the next one, and the final square on row 2, it's Mr. Beast gets a Super Bowl commercial. So by February, we'll know whether this one came true or not. I put this one down, then I started researching it, and I've seen that in recent days, I think maybe like 3 weeks ago, he said something about having a Super Bowl commercial idea, and I don't know if that went anywhere. But this one kind of came to me in a panic to write up these cards. I was very much trying to think of one that could be interesting, and I was asking my friends about sort of what I should put on this card, and they said a lot of things like, Mr. Beast slows down with a mystery illness. Mr. Beast dies. Lots of morbid ones for Mr. Beast. And in previous years, we've predicted things like the Mr. Beast kind of Chris scandal. That one was crazy. And so he's being put back in here, but in a more wishy-washy, internet culture-y, funny one. This one, it doesn't really matter if it doesn't happen or not. But I think he's going to get a Super Bowl commercial. Doesn't matter for what company. I just think he's going to be sort of prominently featured in and or directing one, producing one. It's going to be very clear whether he's the guy in charge or whether he's just a feature in it. And I think it'll be the former of those. So for the first one on row 3, we have the Social Network sequel, Bombs. So the actual title of this, I believe, is The Social Reckoning. I love the Social Network film. I really like the writer Aaron Sorkin. I really, really like the whole film, the atmosphere, the fact that nothing ever really happens in the film. It's more like it's a dialogue-heavy, not slow burn, but it's sort of that ilk where it could be interpreted to be boring, but no one actually does. It's that quality of film that they can make such a person-to-person interaction be so drama-filled and sort of so good to watch. And I think, although they've brought Aaron Sorkin back on, I just can't see this going well. I think it's a modern classic for a reason. People love the film. None of the original actors are going to come back because they say they've outgrown it, and I agree. This project is dubious at best. And so we've got Jeremy Strong in the lead role, I believe, playing Zuckerberg, and we've got it's essentially about the whistle blowing, I think, for the Cambridge Analytica scandal. I believe that's what it's about. I can't see it going well, and the criteria for this one essentially is just going to be that, like in recent years when I've said something's going to bust or something's going to bust, pause, when something's going to like go bust or like be or flop or something like that, or like the Minecraft movie one like from last year, it'll be my own personal estimation of it in the end, but I think we'll know. Well, the box office will probably tell us. We'll know, I think. It won't be as well received as the last one, that's for certain. Moving on, we've got, honestly, so this one is pretty similar to the last one in the sense that it's like entertainment and kind of like pretty pessimistic, but major game studio goes bust, as in like, the one I discussed with my friends when I was writing this, or they suggested it to me, I believe, would have been Ubisoft. So that's the kind of one that seems like it could be more vulnerable than the rest. I'm not saying Epic Games or even Activision are going to sort of drop off the face of the earth, but I'm saying a recognizable household games brand that you will know from maybe some of your favorite games, a well-known one, is going to go bust. And I think Ubisoft's going to be a good example of that. I don't know if they even have remotely got trouble that could lead to that. But that's, I feel, the kind of name that might just out of nowhere go, we're saddled with $100 billion in debt and we can't keep going any further. And so basically the criteria for that one is, once again, we'll know. We'll know if something like Ubisoft goes under. Moving on, we've got a bit more of a light-hearted one. I've tried to put on my fashionista, my sort of finger on the pulse of the social activity hat for this one. And I'm going to go and say spiky hair with frosted tips, in brackets, back in style. It doesn't have to be frosted tips, but it's kind of that style, just to get evocative imagery in your mind. Sort of Brad Pitt, I think Justin Bieber did it at one point, Sugar Ray kind of thing, that kind of hair. The guy from Malcolm in the Middle, that hairstyle was popular going from the 90s to the 2000s, and I think my reasoning for this one is that things like the mullet, which I can't really stand, have come back in well, it's probably mean to say I can't stand them, but like I think there's some people out there who got a mullet who have no business getting a mullet. They should not have got a mullet, but they got one because it became really popular out of nowhere. And I think if we're going to work back through the cycles, we're going to go back through everything and bring it right back round to the 90s, 2000, eventually we'll be sort of copying our own hairstyles from a few years ago. I think next on the list is going to be something a bit wacky and zany from the late 90s. And so my choice here is not going to be like the curtain style that maybe Leonardo DiCaprio had, or like Johnny Depp. I'm going to go with the spiky hair and frosted tips. That's a big part of it, I think, frosted tips, because that will really sell it. And I think they can look good on the right person. And so you could see someone like Timothée Chalamet, sort of not to say that he is this, but a modern day Brad Pitt who's trying out all these different hairstyles and just fucking around with them, see what works. Someone like that comes in, does the hairstyle, and before we know, everyone's got it. I don't know who it would be, but I kind of feel that this is the year of the spiky hair, the frosted tip, if you will. So continuing on the sort of the popular culture side of things, everyone knows IShowSpeed right now. Very big streamer, bigger than I ever thought he would be, and honestly, not even the worst in terms of like the kind of things they're doing. It's not just gaming. This guy is doing very much like world tours and stuff. It is a very interesting thing to watch from afar, and I think that IShowSpeed in this year, this is not wishing it upon him, by the way, and I don't think he'll do anything actually criminal. I think he's just going to be accosted by the police. The square is IShowSpeed gets arrested. And so the idea is, I'm not sure he's ever going to go like abroad as much as he was this year, because I think he's probably completed the whole thing he was doing around that. But, let's say he's out and about, he's doing something or whatever, and the police stop him, and someone in his posse or whatever, or someone, including him, are going to be put in handcuffs. They're going to be actually arrested. And I'm not talking like they're swatted and detained. That's different. I'm not talking like questioned and detained. I'm talking handcuffs, back of the car, being booked. Whether that's for like a citation or whether it's actually to be taken down to the sort of county jail or whatever it is. And I think we're going to know if that happens, obviously. And so the only criteria for this one is that he gets arrested. He gets honest to God arrested for something that he necessarily didn't necessarily do, but something they had reason to arrest him. It's not like a, and if he got arrested following a swatting incident, if he was struggling or whatever and he was arrested for resisting, then that still counts. He just has to be honest to God arrested, and it's not like a confusion moment with the police. So going on to the next row here, I believe, the last row, we have Messi leaves Miami. So with this one, it's part of the football, soccer world, if you will. Lionel Messi plays for Inter Miami, and he's a part owner of the club. And he's renewed his contract, I think, weeks ago, which I didn't realise, but he's renewed his contract to stay there till 2028. I don't think that's going to happen. But I'm predicting essentially that by some means he leaves Miami. So whether that's because he takes on an injury, which hopefully not, if it's not the case, but if he takes on an injury, he can't play anymore and he has to sort of leave Miami in the sense that he can't fill the rest of his contract, or whether he genuinely just leaves because he's retiring. That's what I see happening. I don't know why. I think it's probably a bad bet because he's going to be a very resilient presence in footballing for years to come. And he's not quite as old as like a Ronaldo is, for example, and so he'll be 41 by the time he ends his contract in Miami, so that he could well stay there till then. But I don't know. I think for some reason this year he leaves Miami, gets out of there. Don't know why. So for the next one, this might be a bit of wishful thinking, but I did this back in 2022, I believe, when the World Cup was going on that time. And I did the same square. England win the World Cup. So I'm from England. I support England as so much as I watch the World Cup these days because our team has been the quality of the football, more so than the team, has been awful. But we've got a new manager. I believe we're doing very, very well. I think we are sort of, I don't know if we've lost yet under Thomas Tuchel, but we are looking down the barrel of a very big team this year, a very good team, and a very big tournament. And so I think there's a real chance, a real shot that we go all the way. We'll see. I don't know. But this one will be pretty obvious if it comes true or not. So for the last one, we've got this is the last prediction square, before we have obviously the free square in the bottom right. Tesla robot appears in a rap music video. So this year, I am told the Optimus Gen 3 or whatever it is, Tesla's robot, is in production for companies. They're going to make like 11,000 of these things and sell them off for 20 grand a pop. I cannot imagine a world where a rapper does not acquire one of these. Some rapper will acquire one of these robots, even if it's just to promote it, and there's no way we don't see like a Optimus Gen 3 money spreading or something, like standing on the hood of a Tesla. That's the kind of thing that some rappers would do, and I think this is the year we're going to see something like that. Who knows? Maybe that'll cause the AI bubble to pop. I don't know. It would do it for me. So that one, obviously, I might miss it next year because there's a lot of rappers out there. There's probably going to be a lot of those robots appearing in different things, but if I see it, I'll call it as it is, and then we'll have completed that square. So that completes our 2026 bingo card. Right, like I said, very rushed production this year, but I, at the end of the last videos, all the videos we've done so far, obviously it's a very yearly thing, I can look back at the progress. This year, I'm not so sure that there was massive progress in terms of like the subscriber count of this channel. I just wasn't very active. I made some of my favorite videos ever on this channel this year, and I'm thankful to everybody who watched them, but I've been subsumed in the latter part with a lot more personal projects. I graduated from university as well, from college, and that sort of led to, not being a lot of free time on my hands. And so in the interest of time, I'll just say thank you to everybody who watched it. We won't go over this was, how much we grew or whatever, but thank you to everybody who watched any video on the channel. Thank you for watching this one. And hopefully I'll be back in some capacity in the year to come. I hope to make more videos than I have in the latter part of this year, let's put it that way. And I hope to make good quality videos. I might go in different directions, I don't know, but essentially, thank you for watching. And that's your bingo card. That is your 2026 bingo card. And so I hope to see you back, at the very least, next year, this time next year, for the bingo card to be ticked off, which I definitely will do. And hopefully for the next video, whenever that may be. Subscribe if you want to see more like this. I forgot my own intro. I haven't made a video or outro, so I haven't made a video in ages. Subscribe if you like more like this. Like the video or something. Stay greasy. That's the one I remember. Stay greasy, friends. And stay greasy, friends.